All right, here we are, the second major of the year, and the bickering just continues. Over the weekend, we had a huge three-way fight between Brandel Chamblee, Anthony Kim, and Phil Mickelson. We're going to fill you in on all of that, bring you up to speed on what you missed, but the frustration just seems to continue between the fans and the media with this ongoing fight. On top of that, we seem like we're just getting nowhere closer to a deal. We've even got longtime friends, guys like Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods, seemingly at odds as Rory tries to get back into the player advisory board. And he's now landed on a subcommittee, which I find incredibly interesting. But all of it leads to another clear view that we've got a very, and to use even Rory's words, messy picture going on. And it's like we said before, it's the last conversation that wants to be had as we lead into a major. So we're going to bring you guys in the conversation. I want to get some of your take on it in the comments of, are you sick of it? Are you sick of seeing this and seeing the consistent bickering? But of course, I got to bring you up to speed on some of what happened, because if you missed some of the news over the weekend, it went down once again. Yeah.
Well, there's no doubt it all went down over the weekend. I mean, it seems constant. It seems like every week something new is coming out. Somebody's taking jabs at somebody. This time, Phil's back on his high horse. Anthony Kim, surprisingly coming out. The stuff he's saying after being gone for so long. Interesting to hear what he had to say.
Yeah, in a way, it's a little bit familiar names. Like if there's guys who are going to get into the weeds, controversial guys like Brandel Chamblee and Phil always has something to say. Sure. Now, of course, what I'll do is all these it all went down on Twitter. I'll link to all of that in the show notes so you guys can read through the whole conversation. I'm going to try to summarize it for you because a little bit of it did get into the weeds. And honestly, I think the bigger picture that we want to talk about here is what the quarreling itself is leading to and if we've got a resolution to this at all. But just to kind of bring you up to speed, basically what happened was, and I can't use all the language as it's definitely not safe for work, so to speak, sure, that Anthony Kim came out the gate with. But just to kind of summarize, he attacked Brandel Chamblee, basically calling him a hypocrite because of Chamblee's seemingly softening stance on what's going on with LIV, the PIF, et cetera, et cetera. Chamblee responded, but kind of out of nowhere dragged Phil Mickelson into this. He opened up his long and windy tweet with saying, "This is about as inaccurate as a lot of Mickelson's drives." Oh, wow. So that's where in a second we're going to get into what Phil had to say, because he pulled Phil in there. But he went on and kind of sounding like the same argument that he's been making, the fact that LIV supporting, as he says, like a tyrannical dictator. Mm-hmm. And he made some very clear and obvious jabs at Anthony Kim, even saying the particular language that he uses, which could be considered derogatory towards women, saying like, hey, how you use that language after just talking about a whole story about your daughter. And then it really personal attack after personal attack after personal attack. Where I think the real news here and the real thing of something that's actually some, substance that we would want to talk about, because again, it makes for good headlines. It makes for good TV drama, sure, so to speak. But it's maddening, it's frustrating, and it's exhausting for the fans to see this. Yeah. Where I think that we have something to actually discuss here is the points that Phil Mickelson makes in retaliation. Yep. And I have a bigger question to ask you, which is, is this what ultimately needed to happen to make the changes that wanted to be made?
Right. And I think to that point, and I'm sure you're going to harp on some of Phil's comments, one of the things he mentions is the fact that the game was broken. And then, going through that tweet and just seeing a lot of the comments, you could still see people are mixed. And this is what I want to ask you guys about in the comments. What do you think? Do you think golf was broken before this, or is it broken now because of it? Right. And that's what people are still fighting about. Even Phil talking about the average age is 60, now 65 for the PGA Tour. It has no no global president. They're very U.S.-centric, all that stuff. He makes valid points, but how do we know if it's true? Like, what did golf have a problem before LIV, or did it not?
There were players who had gripes, there's no doubt, and that's what Phil gets into, is his own personal gripes. My question is, and something I want to dig into, is whether this fracturing, splitting of golf, between ripping apart to forming a new league in being LIV, and the backing and all that type of stuff, was that the vehicle that needed to happen to make change? And I don't have necessarily a clear answer. I think there's merit on both sides of this argument, but I want to dig into it. But first, let's kind of go to what the sentiment, what had to be said. As this argument was unfolding on Twitter, you had Monday Q Info jump in, who's obviously a PGA Tour insider, and he said, no matter who you agree with, all of it's gotten so exhausting. Pro golf is broken, and it makes me sad. I hope it soon finds a way back. So, again, saying what everyone's thinking. Now, here's where Phil comes in, right? And Phil tries, and I've seen countless articles kind of breaking down, some people saying there's merit to what Phil is saying. There's other people who are saying this is Phil just kind of searching for validation for the decision that he made, etc. But what Phil said was, or golf was broken and is in the process of being fixed. He said, as you mentioned earlier, the average age of a PGA Tour viewer recently went from 60 to 65. It's totally U.S.-centric and has no plan to globalize opportunities. Monopolistic control of media rights wouldn't allow for players to use YouTube and other social media platforms to promote the game to the next generation. And working from within the tour wasn't an option, i.e. Bryson. What he's doing now wasn't allowed before LIV. Fixing problems takes time, but it's better than waiting for it to collapse entirely.
Okay.
So, one last thing that I'll throw in here. Monday Q kind of had the last word. He said, don't disagree it was not perfect before, especially with regards to the media rights. And the PGA Tour took advantage of the monopoly. But right now, it's pretty broken, in my opinion. Commenters taking unnecessary shots at players, calling him, I'll leave that word to your imagination. He's hoping to get it fixed quickly and correctly. Here's hoping to getting it fixed quickly and correctly. So here's the question I ultimately have for you. And yeah, we asked the question, was it broken, right?
Right.
I think to a certain extent for the players, there was grievances, right? The length of the schedule, how demanding the schedule was becoming. I think that that's something that is valid in a lot of ways.
Right.
Secondarily, their control over the media rights. Phil is someone who's a proponent of this. He brought this up. You know, his likeness, image, whatever, all very much owned by the PGA Tour. And then there were guys who were saying, you know, the PGA Tour as a nonprofit was making more money than it should have, and it's retaining a lot of that money. All that type of stuff. Now, some of that we're not privy to as far as what is actually factual because it hasn't come out in any type of discovery or anything with legal. But the question that I have, and this is going to lead largely into the conversation we're going to have about Rory trying to get back on the policy board and all that stuff, was did it really require the players actively leaving the PGA Tour for another product for this change to happen? Because one thing that we're seeing right now across the board is a huge hang-up of getting this deal done with the PIF has been that, and we've talked about this here on the show multiple times, the fact that the PGA Tour is it's a player members organization. And one of the hardest parts of getting this deal done has been getting all the members on board.
Right.
So what that does tell you is that the members do have a say, right? So it makes me wonder, could Phil have led the charge a little bit more internally? I almost think like not unionized, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like
totally.
union, like coming together, forming groups of like collectively bargaining as players to get what they needed.
Right.
Or did they need such a dramatic and drastic, method to get what they wanted done?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that other method was just available for them at the time. With the new LIV golf league stirring up or in the works, it was available for them. Whereas in other sports, they don't have that availability. They might just go on strike or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, but if you believe that, like some people will believe that LIV was created and founded by Greg Norman with Phil Mickelson in his ears, a lot of them will at least make you want to believe or try to believe that the mission of it was to create things that the players couldn't get out of the PGA Tour.
Right.
It's not just, now the other side of it is you could say that it wasn't created for those reasons. It was really created because of, the Saudi funding. They wanted to get into the league or whatever it may be. I don't know. I kind of struggle with it because I think like how much effort, and I know Phil had interviews where he had voiced some of his displeasure with the way the PGA Tour did certain things, but did you really exhaust all options? Like if Phil is truly convinced that this is the driver of the change that they want, younger audience, more loose media type of rights and stuff for the players, globalization, traveling to new locations and opening up the game globally. Could that not have been done and forego all of this pain that it's caused?
That's probably just
the viewers and the fans.
They probably couldn't. There was probably no light. It was probably voiced. Right. Like you said, we don't know what happened behind closed doors, but maybe this is something they've been fighting for like a decade now. Right. I don't know if Phil's been vocal on this, like YouTube rights, media rights, and all of this stuff for longer than when LIV was in existence, and just kept getting shut down, and just ultimately his grievances just kept growing and growing and growing to the point where it just made it easy for me, like, the heck with this, I'm gone. I'm doing this thing with Norman. We're going for it. It's a risk. It's a gamble. We're gonna.
I would love some more insight into how much of those were options and chances and attempts were actually truly exhausted,
right,
versus how much of this is a postscript being written after the fact, where they cynically you could say they made the jump for the money, and then now they're trying to apply the reasoning to it in post.
Yeah, it could be.
I just don't know. But the reality is, it's undeniably having a full effect on the culture around golf, and even what I would say expanding into those margins, into those fringes of just sport culture in general. And I see this because I'm starting to see it. We live it. We live it in golf news. We're here doing this constantly. But when you start to see it leaking into mainstream type of media, and here we are, right? We're on the cusp of the second major of the year. We've got very easily written, very exciting potential stories here. You have Rory McIlroy coming off an incredible Sunday, comeback win, comes from behind, against Xander Schauffele.
He's won at many times in a place he's going to where he's won.
Wins in dramatic fashion, and now heading into a major at Valhalla, where he's won a major before.
It's a perfect
The
script.
stories are there, right? And yet this is me today. Like, I wake up, first thing I always do, for right or wrong, I grab my phone, when I wake up, and I open it up, and the first thing it does is it's an iPhone, so it's got Apple News on it, right? And this is not something that I'm actively curating or looking for. And for example, I'm not even a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, right? But the first article that pops up, and I see this, is that, read this headline right across the top: everybody is sick and tired of the PGA Tour LIV golf fight, especially me. And the subtitle said, an inane social media feud underscores how exhausting golf civil war has become.
Yeah.
And he's referencing exactly what that. Over the weekend, here's Rory McIlroy, big win, heading into a big major, and yet blasted across every news outlet was Brandel Chambly throwing down with Anthony Kim and Phil Mickelson. And if that's not evidence that we're headed down the wrong path, I don't know what is.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There should have been better storylines. They should have been talking about the great crowds over at the Wells Fargo and the dogfight between Xander and Rory. I mean, it made for some like old. I don't want to call it olden days Sunday PGA Tour.
Yeah,
but it was that feel good PGA Tour Sunday again. We haven't had that in a while.
Right.
But again, it was overshadowed by this.
And if this is what, out of all those stories, what the outside media is picking up. So what I mean by that is, of course, Golf Digest, Golf Week. All these guys are going to write every story, right? But the broader media outlets, like the Wall Street Journal, whatever it may be, are going to pick and choose a couple stories here and there. And the stories that they're choosing is on the frustration.
Yeah.
And so this is, again, where we saw like the drop in viewership of the last round of the Masters, down 20%, stuff like that. I still don't fear losing the diehards. You're not going to lose the diehard fans. It's the casual viewers who are fed up with this.
Yeah.
And they're just seeing who's fighting about what now. I think the sensation of the drama has kind of come and passed. So you guys let us know in the comments, first and foremost, do you truly believe that, and I really want to hear these takes, because there's so much nuance to this that I don't think there's a clear answer. But do you truly believe that the only way to make the changes on the PGA Tour, the only way to get their voices heard was for players like Phil and others to physically remove themselves from the tour and start a rival tour? Or could this have been handled differently? Could there have been more push from the inside to gather players together as a membership organization and potentially ask for whatever these demands were, whether it was a schedule that was less demanding, whether it was a more international representation, whether it was certain degrees of media rights and their likeness and image, whatever it was the only way to have this happen being this fracture of the league? And will this ultimately answer that problem for them?
Yeah.
Will this, as Phil keeps reminding everyone that this is part of the process, it's happening, change is happening, it's getting better. And it's hard to argue with that. In a lot of ways, players are making more money if that's the change that they wanted, right?
Right.
The tour is kind of loosening up certain things. So some change is being made, and it's hard to argue with that. But in the same token, was this the only way to go about it?
Yeah, I don't know. And the comments have been great, especially on that Twitter. I even saw some guy had an idea of just saying, why doesn't the DP World Tour and LIV just merge and create the Global Golf League and just have your global exposure? PGA Tour just focuses on U.S. and does its thing.
Right.
With these new capital ventures that they're getting money for.
Well, that's just it. We've said it. We see it. It's in our face now. It's a problem.
Yeah.
The separation is a problem, and it's hurting the game. So that's the next question. Why? Why have we, when we had a framework agreement that was a hard and fast date, they all talked about, the end of the year last year, and then the 11th hour, it gets pushed back and saying, we're going to have an answer by the Masters. Nothing happens again. And now we're into the second major of the year, potentially halfway through the majors, and we still don't have an answer. So why is it? So let's take a quick word from our sponsors here. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the potential infighting that is slowly revealing itself on the PGA Tour, with now Rory wanting to get back onto the policy board. What happened with all that? And also, there's one major change that's never happened before that's happened now for the PGA this year, including LIV Golf, and a player getting in on LIV Golf merits that I want to go over because it could signal the biggest change in major qualifying we've seen since LIV's creation. So let's do a quick word from our sponsors. We're going to get right back into that. So I've seen everybody on social media having a little bit of fun with this. Like, how do you mark your Titleist?
Yeah.
Right. So let me be curious to ask you how you mark yours, but I'll give you a little insight into mine. I got my lucky number, and it's cool when you order your balls from Titleist, you can kind of order custom numbers. Yes. So I got number 19 on there, and then call it, a little bit of superstition, call it a little bit of just a lingering from a habit that I've always done, because since playing high school golf, I've always done this with my Titleist. I like to put just one single red dot just above where the eye is in Titleist. Keep it simple, but once you do it, I feel like you just do that forever, and it just becomes your thing.
I love it. And for me, it's the Golficity logo has been on the balls for forever. So for me, I know that's it. And if I have a Sharpie nearby, I'll try to draw the line over the Pro V1X just so I know. Mark your ball on the green, dude, and line it up for the putt. Don't be lazy. That's just my take.
That's just it. And there's so many different ways to do it, whether it's just for like a little bit of fun and vanity out there, the way you mark it, or whether you're using it really as an alignment aid and putting a nice line on there. There's just so many different ways to mark your Titleist. So we want to hear from you guys. Let us know in the comments. How do you mark your Titleist?
And the all-new FootJoy Pro SLX are here. We're loving these shoes. They're engineered with the Power Track system, transforming golf footwear with their innovative 3D X-Wing. And that little X you see underneath the shoe when you lift it. Super cool. It's unique. And what it's doing, it's redistributing energy during your swing for that enhanced stability.
Yeah, grip that ground.
Yeah, you got to grip that ground. We talk about how important that the footwear is as part of your golf equipment. And that Engaged 3D X-Wing exposed heel stabilizer, it effectively manages that lateral and upper movement. So ensuring that you have the comprehensive blend of traction, their comfort, the comfortable level on these things is great, and control, allowing you to advance your game. So, guys, shoes are important. You don't think about it too often. Finding the right shoe is important for your golf game. Definitely check out the FootJoy Pro SLX. huge thanks to Golf Zone Social. It's one of our favorite places to play indoor golf, favorite place to have some of these meetups we've been having with a lot of you guys. Full bar, food menus. Each location comes equipped with, TVs. It's just the ultimate golf hangout, and for any season. I mean, who cares, cold or warm? You got some time, you go lunch break even, you head over to one of these places for an hour. You grab a nice one of those. Remember that corn dip? It's one of my favorite things on the menu, by the way. Every time I go,
that Italian chop sandwich, man, that
dude, that thing was really good. So we're going to be doing a lot of events there, so stay posted. We did one over Masters weekend. That was just a meetup. Now we're doing a full-blown tournament June 22nd in Brooklyn at their newest location. That's right, we are doing a tournament. It's limited, so the chance to win is actually pretty good. We're gonna be around like 50 people for this, and the prizes, guys, are insane. We're gonna be giving away a $3,000 Golf Zone Wave. This is their indoor simulator. Incredible technology. We've done countless reviews and stuff on it. You guys know it. You'll love it. It's a chance to win it. Plus, they're giving away foursomes to golf courses all around the area. Either way, you don't want to miss it. Go to golficity.com/register. Secure your spot. Again, space is very limited. So like I said, chances of winning are pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So one of the big things that we saw, the headline splashed everywhere, Tiger and Rory, potentially on their relationship being on thin ice. And here, guys, they've got a very good relationship. We see it like when they compete in things like, their matches that we've had, like in the primetime matches, and you see the banter between the guys, and you could tell they've got a good relationship. But the fact, and even the insinuation that they're on thin ice or there's some pushback there, and this, we're going to talk about why it's largely over Rory trying to get back into the Players Advisory Board. I think if it does anything, it kind of continues to shed a light on just how deep these scars are going as part of this, the potential merger, the framework agreement, and just how divided players, even if they're not letting that on verbally in their press conferences, just how divided these players are. And it just shows me further evidence why we are just seemingly no closer. And I would love nothing more than, trust me, to have the next news headline come across that they finally worked out the agreement and some sort of merger is going to happen, and we could start to put this in a rearview mirror. But this is kind of evidence of it. So just to kind of bring you up to speed, basically what happened was Rory had floated the idea of rejoining the Player Advisory Board. I cannot speculate or speak for his thinking. I don't know what the reasoning was. Maybe he had time to reflect and be away from it for a while, and now he wanted back in. It seemed like Rory left for what seemed like all the right reasons, a refocusing on his game, not wanting to muddy, being in the trenches in the mud anymore. He talked about how he had put so much of himself out for the PGA Tour, only to be the, as he said, sacrificial lamb when they quickly and abruptly announced the merger. So I can understand and get behind Rory's decision to just kind of leave that to the other guys and just refocus on his game. And it seemed like it's paying off. Here's Rory with another win this last week. He's playing well again. He won at the Zurich. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Hey, your plan's working. Like, what's up? And then all of a sudden, he kind of floats this idea of going back in. It was met with, as the nice way to say it would be pushback, right? Players spoke up. They didn't love it. Not everybody was willing to go on record about what they thought, but I'll give you an idea of one of the sentiment. One who was Kevin Streelman. So what Streelman said, speaking about Rory, he said, he was very clear that it was too much for him. He had business dealings, he had a kid, and he wants to focus on his game. Trust me, I get it. But once you quit, you're not getting back. I wouldn't quit on something that you were elected to by your peers. To want back is peculiar. So, I mean, they were saying, like, what's his motive? What's his motivation was questioned. And this is where, again, we did not get a direct quote from Tiger, but multiple news outlets had speculated that Tiger was one of the ones who was, their relationship, as they said, had soured, and Tiger was one of the ones saying that he didn't really want Rory back into the mix.
That's interesting.
It really is.
To hear those two beefing, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that was, and it was, again, I think one of the biggest things was I don't want to call it a distrust, but a little bit of a raised eyebrow from the players saying, like, why do you want it back in? Because like I said, like I just listed out, there was all the very clear and seemingly understandable reasons why he wanted out. So it's like, Why, Rory?
Did he didn't give an excuse. He didn't give a reason yet.
He didn't fully give a reason, but what Rory had said was, and this is kind of after he had heard from some of the pushback. He said, "So yeah, I put my hand up to help, and it was, I wouldn't say it was rejected. It was a complicated process to go through to put me back in there. So that's all fine. No hard feelings, and we'll all move on." So he's saying, like, in a way, Rory's saying, like, I offered, so to speak, my services to come back in and help. Maybe he felt, like I said, maybe he felt he had enough of a break, and now I don't think Rory's the type of guy. He's a sidelines guy.
Yeah.
I think it itches and irks him to be in there. But
Yeah.
here's Rory saying, I tested the waters, and the waters weren't. They're a little chilly, you know?
Right. Interesting. I'm curious why. I think it just came down to the reflection and people chirping in his ear, his team saying, "Hey, you got to get back in there," for whatever reason. Why, I don't know. But for me, if all the things that Rory went through and all the feelings, especially when LIV first started, and like you said, he was that sacrificial lamb, and he was able to get out. It's like the old, like, they bring me back in. Why would you go back?
Because I just don't think that Rory's a sidelines guy. Yeah. I don't think he has the ability to stay out of it. You know,
because it's hard to get out, and all that to get out, and now to go back in.
And it's working. You're playing really well. Why, especially now, guys focused on winning more majors, why get into something that was a distraction before?
Yeah.
And it really does make you wonder.
Right.
But now, as it sounds like that's going to be the clean cut, not going to happen, out of nowhere, Rory lands on a subcommittee that almost sounds made up.
Come on.
Right? So here's the deal. So basically in some of the tweets and just kind of looking through it, Todd Lewis had tweeted about it, and he referenced basically a news announcement, a story that that Golf Channel had put together, basically saying that Rory McIlroy, along with Tiger Woods and Adam Scott, will be members of a transaction subcommittee that has been formed to represent the PGA Tour in negotiations with the PIF. And Todd Lewis said, the story has a thorough explanation of what the newly formed transaction committee will do in trying to get a deal done between the PGA Tour and the PIF, along with the significant figures on that subcommittee. So, and he also said it also has insightful, opinion from Brandel Chambly.
Right.
So here, around and around we go. But now, so here's, you got the Players Advisory Board, and last week we had reported there was just Tiger was the only the player involved in the negotiations directly with the PIF. But so how much validity is really there to this essential, like, quarrel or souring between Tiger and Rory, when seriously. Rory still ends up on a subcommittee, which is just an intimate group of a couple of players with Tiger Woods, and they're the ones who are negotiating.
Yeah.
So, yes, to me, there's a certain degree where all of this sounds like it's all audibles. Yeah, it feels like they're playing everything by the seat of their pants, and it's made up.
Yeah, that's what it sounds, made up.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds
But
like.
what it sounds to me is disorganized.
That's it, too.
And I've said this before, like, we need some sort of leadership to emerge who is not only helping to iron this out and put the wheels in motion to get some sort of agreement done, whatever that agreement is, but more so step in and be the direct communicator to the press, be the direct communicator to the fans, so that we're not ultimately getting all of our news of the progression of this potential merger in dissecting bickering, quarreling tweets between Brandel Chambly, Anthony Kim, and Phil Mickelson.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Yes, no answer. Do you think a deal ever gets done?
As every day that goes by, I get closer to the no.
Yeah, I'm hard no. I'm just hard that there's going to be a no, and that we're going to see golf played out like it currently is.
Yeah.
Guys showing up to majors now from LIV, right? We're going to get into that. That's just it. Guys are, exempt for 10 years who are on LIV.
The two tours are clearly finding ways to operate separate of each other, but doesn't necessarily mean they're helping each other out. To me, I think one thing we'll look back on, whether or not a deal gets done, And one thing that will be lamented and regretted by both sides, I think, is just how self-inflicted the wounds to golf really, truly were. And that's where I go back to before. Was this what needed to be done? You know, there's a very clear evidence that so to speak, tours or spin-off tours can be created, i.e., look at Tiger's the TGL, the indoor league that's being created, right? And that lives still within the umbrella of the PGA Tour. And it just makes me wonder, if an international component was something you wanted, all that type of stuff, could this had been done with players negotiating directly with PGA Tour leadership and whatever? And maybe it could have taken years. Maybe it took, Phil and other internally to get people on their side and whatever. But could this have been done so much in a less kind of a cut and run method, which is what is used now, which just physically, did we have to tear it apart in order to rebuild it? Or could it have been just restructured from the inside?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And that's what I wonder. But in what you were saying, and this is an important thing we got to talk about too, as the tours, as we don't get seemingly any closer to an agreement, they are finding ways to operate separately. And although it might have been a mildly overshadowed, I think this is one of the biggest news of the entire past week or so. And this is the fact that Taylor Gooch got an invitation to play in this week's major, the PGA Championship. Why this is so important is that it is the first invitation we've seen to any major that was not based upon performance in something outside of LIV. And what I mean by that is that
because he's done nothing else outside of LIV.
He really does not play really
DP
outside of LIV. In fact, Gooch has even said he's not even going to attempt to qualify for the U.S. Open,
right?
Where these guys can go to qualifying events. So keep this in mind. Last month, you had the PGA of America, who runs the PGA Championship. They invited Neiman, and so did Augusta. Invited him to the Masters, but it was largely based and cited and quoted on his victory at the Australian Open.
Based on play performance.
Based on play.
Non-LIV event.
Right, and this is where they were saying they wanted to give representation to other Opens. Here at the Australian Open, elevating the Australian Open status by saying if you win that, you get this invite.
Yeah.
This is different. This is where Taylor Gooch was offered an invitation, and he's not done any of that. So it shows it's strictly based on his performance at LIV. That could potentially open the floodgates. And this is what Greg Norman wanted, because Greg Norman, remember, he removed the LIV's even attempt to qualify for official World Golf Rankings, because that used to be the ticket in.
Right.
Makes you wonder, is Greg Norman negotiating directly with each major saying, let's create some sort of qualifying path for LIV golfers? Is it the top 5 guys? Who is it? Right. The cynical side of me makes me wonder, is this what it was? Is it more of a squeaky wheel gets the grease? Because here you have, it was Gooch who, and in a lot of ways you could argue he put his foot in his mouth because social media didn't take too kindly to his what he pointed out. But he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that let's say Rory won a major, he said it had to have an asterisk because the best players weren't there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a field day of memes came out of that.
Of course.
It's like, oh, Gooch wasn't there.
He quickly became one of the most hated guys on tour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, is this a true extending of an olive branch, a reaching out from the majors to LIV saying there's going to be some sort of methodology for you to qualify in outside of World Golf Rankings?
Or are you telling them to put your money where your mouth is?
Or is it a money where your mouth is situation?
Social media had a field day with it, like, okay, you want in? Let's see how well you do against the best in the world.
Right.
I don't know. I think the PGA, there's the PGA of America who hosts this event.
Yes.
I think it's the PGA of America. I think it's more of a shining light for LIV and them working together as opposed to them being dirty, like, all right, come on and put your money where your mouth is. I think of all the majors, the PGA is the more, like, the loosest in regards to LIV.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like Ryder Cup.
PGA Ryder Cup, yeah.
Exactly. So I think Augusta lets him in, but I think Augusta hates Norman. I think the Open hates Norman. for some reason, right? But PGA of America, they might have, like you said, they might have a really great relationship, and he's just working with them, and this is like a really good step in the right direction for him. That's what I think it is.
And really, I mean, all they need is even the door into one major, because if these guys can get in and if they can perform well in that major, they could effectively use that to qualify into other majors, and it's a stepping stone. But there's no denying, I think that there's a certain, and whether these are higher ups who made the decision or just a subset of just maybe even fans, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who think, who are saying like, I hope he doesn't play well, and it shuts him up.
Right.
I'm not saying that I agree. I'm never going to root against anybody to play poorly.
Right.
But he was in the PGA Championship last year. He missed the cut. I think there's going to be a lot of people who their backing of one versus the other is going to be relying on how he plays. Like if he plays really well, there's going to be people saying, "See, live players are
this
competitors."
is his chance to shine, man. Yeah,
but a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
No doubt, a lot of pressure.
It might fire him up. It might fire him up. Imagine he does come out and finishes top 3, even wins it, for crying out loud. Like, the narrative of that, jeez,
huge,
yeah,
huge. Either way, it changes the conversation in the way that now you've got Liv having a potential vehicle to get into major, get invites in one way or another based on their performance over there. So look for that to set precedent and to change some things dramatically. I think it's bigger news than most people even realize at this point.
Totally. And this week particularly, I'm looking to see if the Michael Block thing was kind of a fluke. I don't know. What do you guys? You guys think he's going to show up again this year? I mean, he was the story of the PGA Championship, more so than Brooks last year.
Yeah.
You know?
Isn't that ultimately what we love about golf, though? The fact that, especially these PGA, or more so, I love the U.S. Open and the Open Championship. They're true opens.
Absolutely.
And anybody can come out of nowhere.
PGA professional can play alongside with Rory McIlroy and finish in the top 10 and get invited back next year. It's cool.
You just don't see that.
Let's see if his game comes. I hope he doesn't miss a cut. I hope the story stays.
Yeah.
That's my take.
So lots of interesting stuff to unfold, but let's just keep our fingers crossed that we are able to set some of this aside and put our focus on what could very well be a amazing, major, and some storylines that, if who knows with Rory, he's coming into form, winning 2.
Rory by $1 billion, I think.
It's so hard. Like, I think if anyone's going to get it, it's just Rory gets in his own way sometimes.
Yeah. Is Scotty in the field, or is he having a baby? We don't know. That baby's been
how long is this baby taking? Yeah.
Seriously.
But
we'll see.
There's so many storylines. I think we're in for a really good major. We got an amazing venue in Valhalla. This is going to be a really interesting one. So hopefully this isn't the talk the whole time. And my fingers are fully crossed that we don't make it to a 3rd or possibly 4th major without some sort of clarity of where this is going, because all that's going to lead to is more of this quarreling like we saw with Anthony Kim and Brandel, etc. But weigh in with your thoughts and comments below. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next one.